The rifle case weighed 47 pounds. Kira O'Ellerin knew this because she had carried it across 3 states, through 2 airports, and now through the main gate of Scout Sniper School. At 05:29 on a Monday morning, when the California fog still clung to the training grounds, like a ghost refusing to leave, she stopped at the threshold. Beyond the gate, the compound stretched in ordered rows of barracks and ranges, everything painted in shades of military discipline. 7 figures stood near the equipment shed, their silhouettes sharpening as the sun cracked the horizon. One of them laughed. Kira adjusted her grip on the case. The leather handle had worn smooth in places where her father's palm had pressed for 23 years before hers. She could feel the grooves his fingers had made, permanent impressions in material that was supposed to resist such things. It is not the rifle that is heavy, she thought. It is the promise. She walked forward. The gravel crunched beneath her boots in a rhythm she had learned to control, each step measured, each footfall deliberate. The 7 figures turned. Eyes tracked her movement with the precision of trained observers, measuring her height, her gait, the unusual bulk of the case she carried. One of them smiled, not the kind of smile that welcomed, the kind that calculated. The administrative building smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. A lance corporal sat behind a desk, cluttered with intake forms, his fingers hovering over a keyboard that had seen better decades. He looked up when Kira entered, his gaze dropping immediately to the rifle case. "Staff Sergeant O'Ellerin," she said, sliding her orders across the desk. He took them without urgency. Type something else. The rhythm was deliberately slow, each keystroke a tiny assertion of power over the newcomer who had to wait. "Barracks 7, he said finally. "Formation at 05:30. You are already behind schedule." "I am aware of the time," he smirked. "Shooting starts at 0700, range 4. His eyes flicked to the case again. "Hope whatever is in there still works." Through the window behind him, Kira could see the range where a cluster of personnel had gathered. Someone was demonstrating stance. Someone else was taking notes. The normalcy of it struck her as almost absurd, this mundane machinery of training that would determine careers and futures and the answer to questions she had carried for 3 years. "You are late to the party, Staff Sergeant," the Lance Corporal added. Kira did not respond. She took her papers and walked out, the laughter from behind the door reaching her just before it closed. Barracks 7 was empty when she arrived. 8 bunks lined the walls, 4 to each side, all of them already claimed except for the one nearest the door. The worst position. First to be disturbed, last to find privacy. Kira set her case on the mattress and opened the latches. The sound they made was familiar, 2 clicks that had preceded every significant moment of her adult life. Inside, nestled in foam, she had cut herself, lay the rifle. It was not new. The stock showed scratches from field use, small nicks in the wood that told stories she had heard 100 times. The barrel had been cleaned so often, the original finish had worn to a different shade. The scope was older than most of the students here, a relic from an era when precision meant something different than it did now. They will call it an antique, she thought, running her fingers along the trigger guard. They will say it belongs in a museum. She closed the case without taking the rifle out. Not yet. Not until the right moment. The mess hall buzzed with the particular energy of competitive men in confined spaces. Kira spotted him immediately, the one who had smiled at the gate. He sat at the center table, surrounded by 5 others who leaned toward him like plants seeking sun. Gunnery Sergeant Trent Hollister. She had read his file on the flight here. 12 years in service, 4 deployments. Record scores in marksmanship that had made him an instructor before he turned 30. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that recruitment posters loved to feature. He was also, according to 3 separate complaints that had been quietly dismissed, a problem that nobody wanted to solve. Kira took her tray to a corner table. She ate without tasting, watching the room through peripheral vision. A young Marine sat alone 2 tables away, struggling with something mechanical. His fingers moved with the frantic energy of someone who knew he was being observed and judged. Lance Corporal Pham, 19 years old, first in his family to serve, here on a scholarship that would evaporate if he failed any single evaluation. Hollister's table erupted in laughter. Kira did not need to hear the words to understand the target. The angle of their bodies, the direction of their glances, the theatrical volume of their amusement. Pham's shoulders hunched lower. She finished her meal, cleared her tray, and walked toward the young Marine's table. The room noticed. Conversations dimmed by fractions of decibels, attention shifting like a tide. The scope mount, she said, standing beside Pham. Let me see it. He looked up, startled. Staff Sergeant, I was just... Give it here. He handed it over. The mechanism was simple, a standard adjustment that should have taken 30 seconds, but someone had forced the rotation, cross-threading the internal components until the whole assembly resisted movement. Kira pulled a multi-tool from her pocket, 3 adjustments, 2 counter-rotations. A final click as everything realigned. Someone did this deliberately, she said, handing it back. The threads were stripped before you touched it. Pham's face cycled through confusion, recognition, then something that looked like fear. I thought I just did not understand the manual. You understood fine. The equipment was sabotaged. She kept her voice low. Check everything they give you before you use it. Trust the procedure, not the setup. A shadow fell across the table. Kira did not turn. She did not need to. Museum donation, huh? Hollister's voice carried the practiced casualness of someone who knew every eye was watching. He moved into her peripheral vision, his team arranging themselves behind him like a formation. Excuse me? That case you carried in. He smiled. Looks like something my grandfather would have used. Before he retired, 20 years ago. The table behind him laughed on cue. Kira straightened. She was 5 feet 6 inches tall. Hollister was over 6 feet. The difference should have mattered. It did not. The case contains a rifle, she said. The rifle functions. Functions. Hollister rolled the word around like testing wine. That is one way to describe a relic. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the protein shake on his breath. Wrong gun, sweetheart. This is not a historical reenactment. This is Scout Sniper School. The mess hall had gone quiet. Even the kitchen staff had stopped moving. The rifle meets specifications, Kira said. I verified before transport. Specifications change. Technology advances. Maybe you missed the memo while you were polishing that antique. He crossed his arms. 4 days until qualification. Colonel Drummond himself is coming to observe. You want to embarrass yourself in front of him with that museum piece, that is your choice. I appreciate the concern for my career. Not concern. His smile sharpened. Just reality. This place makes careers or buries them. Right now, sweetheart, you look like someone shopping for a plot. He turned and walked back to his table. His team followed, their laughter resuming before they had even sat down. Kira remained standing for 3 seconds. Then she picked up her tray, deposited it in the collection area, and left the mess hall without looking back. In the corridor outside, she allowed herself 1 breath. 4 counts in, hold for 4. 4 counts out, hold for 4. She was not here to win a popularity contest. She was not here to make friends. She was here to keep a promise made 3 years ago to a man who could no longer speak, in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and endings. Same as you, baby girl. That was what he had said. Same as you. The first physical training session began at 0600. Hollister ran it personally. Staff Sergeant O'Ellerin, he called out 3 minutes into the warm-up. Your form is sloppy, lower, more repetitions. Kira adjusted. The exercise was standard, nothing she had not done 1,000 times. But Hollister counted her repetitions differently than others. Faster, demanding extra sets. Still not good enough. Again. The other trainees continued their own routines, watching from the corners of their eyes. Nobody intervened. Nobody questioned. This was the unwritten curriculum, the lesson about hierarchy that nobody put in the official syllabus. Kira completed the additional sets. Her muscles burned, but she kept her breathing controlled. She understood what Hollister wanted. He was not trying to break her physically. He was trying to make her doubt herself psychologically. The session ended at 0700. Hollister dismissed the group with a wave, but his eyes followed Kira as she walked toward the classroom building. His expression said the same thing. His posture said, not satisfied yet, not finished. The classroom was arranged in tiered rows facing a large screen. Hollister took his position at the front, tablet in hand, every movement projecting competence and authority. When he lectured, his voice carried the confidence of genuine expertise. He knew the material. He knew the material. And he used both to devastating effect. Win calculations, he said, advancing to a new slide. The difference between a hit and an excuse. He paused, scanning the room. Let us see if theory translates to practice. Staff Sergeant O'Ellerin, stand up. Kira rose. The room turned. 300 yards, crosswind from the east at 8 miles per hour. Temperature is 72 degrees. Humidity 40%. Target is stationary. Calculate your holdover and windage adjustment. The numbers aligned in her mind immediately. She had done this calculation so many times, it was less mathematics than instinct. Holdover of 0.4 MOA. Windage adjustment of 1.2 MOA right. Silence. Hollister's expression flickered, a micro-adjustment that most would miss. Textbook answer, he said finally. Anyone can memorize formulas. He waved her to sit down. Real shooting is different. Numbers on paper do not mean anything when you are actually behind the trigger. He moved on to the next slide, but Kira had seen what she needed to see. He had wanted her to fail. When she did not, he had to reframe success as inadequacy. The pattern would continue. She was certain of it. Morning break found her near the equipment shed when a woman approached. Master Sergeant Vance was in her late 40s, with silver streaking her regulation bun and eyes that had seen enough to recognize what others missed. "Oh, Ellerin," she said, "your father was Marcus." Kira went still. "You knew him." "My husband served with him, 18 years ago, back when this place was different." Vance's gaze moved toward the range where Hollister was demonstrating something to his admirers. 3 years ago, word reached us. The illness, the end. It was fast. Not fast enough to stop him from planning. Vance reached into her pocket and withdrew something small, a photograph, creased from being folded too many times. A man in uniform, standing at a shooting position, his stance perfect. Kira recognized the location, range 4, the 200-yard line. "He was here," she said, 25 years ago. He set records that still stand. Vance tucked the photograph away. "Watch your back, Staff Sergeant. Hollister targets what he cannot control, and you are very much outside his control." She walked away before Kira could respond, leaving behind questions that would have to wait. Range practice began at 0900. 12 shooters, 12 lanes, 12 opportunities to prove or fail. Kira set up her position with the mechanical precision of routine, each movement practiced until thought was unnecessary. The rifle felt natural in her hands. The weight distributed perfectly, the scope aligned to her eye without adjustment. This was not a museum piece. This was an extension of herself, trained into her by a man who had believed that tools only mattered if the person behind them was worthy. She fired her first group, clean, centered, the kind of grouping that instructors used as examples. Hollister arrived with his scoring tablet. He studied the target through his binoculars, lips moving as if calculating. Then he marked something on his screen. "Call-out timing was slow," he said. "Acquisition needs work. I am seeing instability in your shooting platform." Kira looked at the target. 3 rounds, grouped tighter than a quarter, exactly where she had aimed. The grouping suggests otherwise. Grouping is one factor. I am evaluating holistically. He smiled. "You pass, but barely." She did not argue. Argument was what he wanted. An opportunity to escalate, to paint her as difficult, to build a narrative that would outlast any evidence. That night, in the barracks, she cleaned her rifle by the light of a small lamp. The rituals of maintenance had always calmed her, the methodical disassembly and reassembly that connected present to past. "We are close," she whispered to the empty room. "Almost there." A knock at the door. Pham stood in the corridor, nervousness radiating from every angle of his body. "Staff Sergeant, I wanted to thank you for earlier." "You already thanked me." "And to warn you." He glanced down the hallway. "Hollister picks targets, people who do not fit his picture of what belongs here. He picked me the first day. And now he has picked you. I am aware. It is not just the scores. It is the isolation, the jokes, the way everyone looks at you like you are already gone." Pham's voice dropped lower. "The last person he targeted quit in week 2. The one before that was transferred out with a medical issue nobody could prove. Thank you for the information, Lance Corporal. Just be careful, please." He left. Kira returned to her rifle, but the movements had lost their meditative quality. She was thinking about patterns now, about systematic destruction disguised as evaluation, about how many careers had ended in this place, not from lack of skill, but from lack of witnesses. A shadow passed her window. Hollister's voice carried from the corridor, too distant to make out words, but close enough to know he had heard everything. Day 2 began with stock exercises, concealment and observation, the art of becoming invisible while watching everything. Kira positioned herself in the designated training area, using natural cover to break her outline. 2 hours in, Hollister approached her position with his tablet. "You were detected," he announced. "By whom?" "By the evaluation team." "At what time?" He checked his tablet. 0917? Kira had been completely still at 0917. She had tracked 3 instructors moving through the area, none of whom had looked in her direction. The claim was impossible. I would like to review the footage. Footage is for after-action review, not for challenging instructor assessments in the field. His smile was patient, the kind used on children who ask too many questions. Are you calling me a liar, Staff Sergeant? Behind him, another instructor shifted uncomfortably. The question was a trap. Agree, and she was insubordinate. Disagree, and she accepted false assessment. I am requesting clarification of the detection method. Request denied. He marked something on his tablet. Return to the assembly area. She returned, but she noted the other instructor's expression. Confusion. The first crack in the wall of unanimous support. The mess hall that evening was a study in social geography. Hollister's table occupied the center, gravitational center of attention. Pham sat alone near the door, making himself small. And around Kira, a circle of empty seats that nobody would cross. She ate in silence, listening to conversations she was not supposed to hear. Hollister was telling stories again, each one featuring himself as hero, each one teaching the same lesson about belonging and not belonging. Some people, he was saying, loud enough to carry, think showing up is enough. Think bringing daddy's old gun makes them special. Laughter. They do not understand that this place runs on performance, not nostalgia. Kira continued eating. The food tasted like nothing. After dinner, Vance found her outside the barracks. Hollister is golden boy material, Vance said without preamble. Connections to people who matter. A record that looks flawless on paper. He has never lost a direct confrontation because he never has direct confrontations. He has insinuations. Subjective assessments, convenient failures that cannot be disputed. Why has no one stopped him? Because the people who could stop him are the people who created him. Vance looked toward the administration building, where lights burned late behind closed blinds. He is what the system rewards. Confidence over competence. Image over integrity. What happened to the people he targeted? Some quit, some were transferred, some finished the course but found their careers mysteriously stalled afterward. Vance met her eyes. You need to understand what you are up against. This is not about marksmanship. This is about whether you can survive being slowly disassembled by someone who leaves no fingerprints. That night, Kira returned to her bunk to find her belongings shifted. Nothing was missing, nothing was damaged. But her rifle case had moved 3 inches from where she had left it. Her notebook was at a different angle. Her spare uniform had been touched. The message was clear. We can reach you. We can enter your space. You are not safe anywhere. She checked the rifle. Every component was exactly as she had left it. Whoever had entered had not tampered with the weapon itself. This was psychological warfare, not sabotage. She sat on her bunk in the darkness, listening to the distant sounds of the base at night. Vehicles moving, doors closing. Somewhere, laughter that might have been at her expense. She could leave. The thought arrived unbidden but honest. She could pack her case, submit a voluntary withdrawal, and return to a posting where competence was rewarded and politics were manageable. But she heard her father's voice in the silence. Not the words themselves, just the texture of his conviction, the absolute certainty he had carried into every challenge. She was not here to escape. She was here to finish what he had started. Day 3 brought the Santa Ana winds, hot currents from the desert that turned the shooting range into a constantly shifting puzzle. Every calculation changed moment to moment. Every shot required real-time adjustment. Hollister assigned lanes with obvious intention. The best positions went to his favorites. The worst, where the wind channeled between buildings in unpredictable patterns, went to Kira. Problem, Staff Sergeant? No problem, Gunnery Sergeant. She set up her position. Around her, the wind gusted and swirled, carrying dust that stung eyes and coated equipment. This was not evaluation. This was theater, designed to create failure that could be blamed on skill rather than circumstance. Kira closed her eyes. Breathe with it. Her father's words from a training session 15 years ago. Wind is just the earth breathing. Learn its rhythm. She opened her eyes, watched the flags at the target line, counted the intervals between gusts, found the pattern hiding beneath the chaos. Her first shot went true, then her second, then her third. When Hollister arrived to score, his expression was carefully neutral. Acceptable, he said, but I am noting environmental compensation errors in your log. The grouping is center mass. Grouping is not the only metric. He made notes on his tablet. Continue, she continued. Shot after shot, each one placed exactly where she intended. And shot after shot, Hollister found something to criticize, something to document, something to subtract from a performance that would have earned praise from any honest evaluator. But someone else was watching now. A Marine she had seen with Hollister's group, a staff sergeant named Coburn, who had laughed at every joke and echoed every dismissal. He stood at the adjacent lane, lowering his binoculars with an expression that did not match his previous behavior. He was looking at her target, then at his own, then at Hollister's scoring tablet. The numbers did not match, and for the first time, someone who mattered had noticed. Evening came with a summons. Vance was waiting outside the barracks, her expression grave. "Colonel Drummond arrives tomorrow," she said. "He is here for the qualification evaluation, but he is also here because word reached him about inconsistencies." "What kind of inconsistencies?" "The kind that make experienced officers uncomfortable." Vance handed her an envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with tape that had turned brittle. "Your father left this with someone who served with him. Instructions were to give it to you at the right moment." Kira took the envelope. The weight was slight, just paper, but it felt heavier than the rifle case. "He knew," she said. "He knew I would come here." Marcus O'Elleran spent 20 years understanding systems, how they worked, how they failed, how they could be beaten by people who refused to play by their rules. Vance stepped back. "Whatever is in there, he meant for you to have it before you face what comes next." She left Kira alone with the envelope and the night and the weight of a promise she was only beginning to understand. The qualification test was scheduled for 0700, 12 candidates, standardized course of fire, objective scoring that left no room for interpretation, except Hollister was the primary evaluator, and objectivity, Kira had learned, was whatever he decided it should be. She arrived at OA 6:30, her rifle case in hand. The range was already populated with support staff, camera operators positioned at multiple angles, safety officers taking their stations. This was a formal evaluation, documented from every perspective. The other candidates filtered in. Pham caught her eye and nodded, the small gesture of solidarity that cost nothing and meant everything. Coburn stood apart from Hollister's usual group, his expression troubled. At 0655, a staff car appeared at the range entrance. The door opened. A man in his 60s emerged, silver eagles gleaming on his collar, his bearing carrying the accumulated weight of 30 years in service. Colonel Isaiah Drummond. He walked directly to the observation platform without acknowledging anyone below. But as he passed Kira's position, something happened. His stride hitched, a fraction of a second's hesitation. His eyes moved to her, then to her rifle case, then away. She had seen him before, not here, at her father's funeral. Standing in the back row, in civilian clothes, leaving before anyone could speak to him. He knew. He had known her father, and he was here now, watching her stand where Marcus O'Elleran had stood 25 years ago. The qualification began at 0700 exactly. Candidate after candidate took their positions, fired their required rounds, received their scores. The process was mechanical, efficient, designed to strip away everything except raw performance. Kira's turn came at 0742. She walked to the line, set up her position, and waited for the command to fire. Hollister approached with his tablet. Standard qualification sequence. 10 rounds, timed, scored on accuracy and consistency. Understood. Begin on my mark. He raised his hand. Mark. She fired. 10 rounds, each one placed with the precision that came from 10,000 practice sessions. The rifle performed exactly as it always had, the old mechanisms working with the smoothness of components that had been maintained with religious devotion. When she finished, the target told a story that needed no interpretation. 10 rounds, 10 holes, all of them centered in the scoring ring. Hollister studied the target through his binoculars. His expression cycled through something complicated, resistance meeting undeniable reality. Acceptable, he said finally, but I am noting stance instability and breath timing irregularities. From the observation platform, Drummond spoke. His voice carried across the range with absolute clarity. I would like to see the actual grouping, Gunnery Sergeant. Hollister froze. This was not part of the script. Colonels observed. They did not intervene. Sir, the scoring is standardized, and I am requesting visual confirmation. Drummond's tone left no room for interpretation. Retrieve the target. A range officer brought the target forward. Drummond descended from the platform, walking directly to where Hollister stood with his tablet. He took the paper target, examined it, then looked at the scoring tablet. "These numbers," he said quietly, "do not appear to match what I am seeing. Sir, there are subjective elements that—" "I did not ask about subjective elements. I asked about objective accuracy." Drummond handed the target back to the range officer. "Continue the evaluation. I will be reviewing all scoring records at the conclusion." He returned to the platform, but the damage was done. For the first time in his career at this school, Hollister had been publicly questioned. The foundation of his authority, the assumption that his assessments were beyond challenge, had cracked. The remaining candidates completed their qualifications. Scores were recorded, results were documented, and throughout, Drummond watched with the patient attention of someone who had learned that truth revealed itself to those willing to wait. At 0900, the formal evaluation concluded. Drummond summoned the senior staff to the administration building for review. Kira returned to the barracks to secure her equipment, knowing that what happened next was beyond her control. But at 0930, Pham appeared at her door. "Coburn talked to the colonel," he said, breathless. "Showed him his own groupings compared to the scores Hollister recorded. There are discrepancies, serious ones." "How do you know this?" "Because Coburn told me. He said—" Pham paused, collecting himself. "He said he was ashamed, that he should have spoken up weeks ago, that watching what happened to you made him remember why he joined in the first place." Kira sat on her bunk. The weight of the moment was settling over her, the realization that small acts of resistance sometimes built into movements larger than any individual. What happens now? Drummond is calling for a full review. Every score Hollister recorded. Every candidate he evaluated. Pham's eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. It is not over, but it is starting. The afternoon brought Chief Instructor Caldwell to the barracks. He was a man in his 50s, career military, with the tired expression of someone who had seen too many cycles of the same problems. "Staff Sergeant O'Elleran, walk with me." They walked along the perimeter road, the Pacific visible in the distance, waves breaking against rocks with the patience of geological time. "I know what you are going to ask," Caldwell said. "Why did I not stop him earlier? Why did I let the scores stand? Why did I protect a system that was clearly broken?" "I was not going to ask that." "No?" He looked at her with genuine surprise. "I was going to ask about options. Specifically, whether there is an evaluation format that removes subjective scoring entirely." Caldwell stopped walking. "What do you have in mind?" "One shot, single target, fixed distance, witnessed by everyone present including the colonel." Kira met his eyes. 200 yards, standing position, no rest, no support, no equipment that can be questioned. That is a demanding request. It is a request that cannot be manipulated. Either the round hits the target or it does not. Either I can do what I claim or I cannot. She paused. "I am not asking for favorable treatment. I am asking for fair treatment. If the only way to get that is to remove every opportunity for interpretation, then that is what I am requesting." Caldwell was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I will speak with the colonel. If he approves, we can arrange it for tomorrow morning. Public venue, full documentation." He started walking again. "But you should understand what you are risking. 200 yards standing is not impossible, but it is extremely difficult, especially with older equipment, especially under observation pressure. I understand. If you miss, Hollister will use it to validate everything he has said about you." "If I miss," Kira said, "he will be right, and I will accept the consequences." That evening, the word spread through the school like wildfire. The woman with the old rifle had requested a demonstration shot. 200 yards, standing, in front of everyone. Hollister's response was audible from 3 barracks away. Perfect. Let her embarrass herself. Let the colonel see exactly what happens when sentiment replaces standards. But Coburn was not laughing, and Pham was sitting in the mess hall with something that looked like hope, and Vance was watching from across the compound with an expression that might have been recognition. Kira returned to her bunk and opened the envelope her father had left. Inside was a single page, handwritten in the precise script she remembered from childhood. No instructions about technique, no secrets about the rifle, just words. "They will try to make you small. They will use rules as weapons and silence as permission. They will call you wrong because they cannot admit they are afraid. Stand anyway, shoot straight, the rest will follow." Signed with his full name. dated 3 days before he died. She folded the letter, placed it in her breast pocket, and slept for 8 hours without dreaming. Dawn arrived at 05:43. Kira walked to the range at 0600, her rifle case in hand. The crowd was already gathering. Word had spread beyond the school. Officers from adjacent commands, training staff from other programs, even a few enlisted who had invented excuses to be present. Hollister was already there, positioned near the observation platform where Drummond would stand. His expression was confident, even eager. This was the finale he had been waiting for. Public humiliation documented for posterity. 200 yards, he announced as Kira approached. Standing unsupported. One shot. This should be instructive. She did not respond. She walked to the firing line, set down her case, and began her preparation. The crowd watched in silence. Camera operators adjusted their angles. Safety officers confirmed range status. The wind was light, barely registering on the flags at the target line. Conditions were as close to perfect as this location ever provided. At 06:55, Drummond arrived. He took his position on the observation platform, binoculars in hand. His expression revealed nothing. Kira opened her case. The rifle emerged piece by piece, each component assembled with the fluidity of absolute familiarity. When she finished, the weapon was complete. The same tool that had served her father for 23 years. The same mechanism that had proven itself in conditions far more challenging than this. Hollister leaned toward one of his companions. "Wrong gun, sweetheart. Wrong stage too." The words carried. He had meant them to. Kira did not acknowledge them. She walked to the firing line, rifle in hand. 200 yards of groomed range stretched before her. At the end, a standard target, its scoring rings visible even at this distance. She assumed her stance, standing unsupported. No bipod, no rest, nothing but muscle and bone and will holding the rifle steady. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out, hold for 4. The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. She found her natural respiratory pause, the moment between heartbeats when the body was most still. The target aligned in her scope, the crosshairs centered. She squeezed. The report echoed across the range. The recoil absorbed into her shoulder. At the target end, 200 yards away, the flag dropped indicating a hit. Silence. Absolute silence. Then Drummond lowered his binoculars. He looked at the target. He looked at Kira, and he said 2 words that carried across the entire range. "Center mass." The crowd erupted. Not cheers exactly, something raw. Voices calling out the same phrase, the same astonished recognition. "No way! No way! No way!" Kira lowered her rifle. Hollister's face had gone pale, the color draining as reality contradicted everything he had constructed. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. She did not look at him. She was looking at the target, at the single hole punched exactly where she had aimed, at the proof that no amount of subjective scoring could now deny. Her father's rifle, her father's technique, her father's promise kept at last. Drummond descended from the platform. He walked directly to where Kira stood, the crowd parting before him, like water before a ship. When he reached her, he did something that made every person present stop breathing. He extended his hand. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "I knew him. 25 years ago, he stood exactly where you are standing now. Same distance, same stance, same result." He clasped her hand. "Welcome home, Staff Sergeant O'Elleran." Behind them, Hollister was already moving toward the administration building, his supporters melting away with each step. The golden boy who had never lost a direct confrontation had just lost in front of everyone who mattered. But Kira was not watching him. She was looking at the target, at the 200-yard line where her father had once stood, at the legacy that was now inextricably her own. One shot, one truth, one moment that changed everything. The promise was kept, but the story was just beginning. The applause faded into something heavier. Drummond still held Kira's hand, but his attention had shifted to the rifle she carried. His eyes traced the worn stock, the aged scope, the scratches that told stories older than most careers on this range. "May I?" he asked. Kira handed him the weapon. The transfer felt ceremonial, 2 generations of service passing between them in a single gesture. Drummond examined the rifle with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating equipment and the people who used it. He checked the action, inspected the barrel, studied the scope mount with particular attention to the adjustment mechanisms. "This is the original configuration," he said. "No modifications, no upgrades." "None, sir. My father believed in maintaining equipment as designed. He was right to believe that." Drummond looked up. "This rifle is 23 years old. The scope predates most of the technology we use today, and you just put a round through center mass at 200 yards, standing unsupported in front of witnesses." From across the range, Hollister's voice cut through the moment. "That weapon needs to be inspected, properly inspected. There could be modifications that are not visible to casual examination." Drummond turned slowly. The movement had the quality of artillery repositioning, deliberate and devastating. "Gunnery Sergeant Hollister, you are suggesting that this rifle has been illegally modified? I am suggesting that the performance we just witnessed requires explanation, sir. The explanation is that Staff Sergeant O'Elleran is an exceptional marksman using well-maintained equipment." Drummond handed the rifle back to Kira. "However, if you insist on formal inspection, I will authorize it, and while we are inspecting equipment, we will also be inspecting records." The color drained from Hollister's face. "Records, sir? I have been watching the camera feeds, Gunnery Sergeant, not just today, for the past 3 days." Drummond's voice carried across the silent range. "Every evaluation, every score, every discrepancy between what the cameras recorded and what appeared in your assessments." The crowd had gone absolutely still. This was no longer a marksmanship demonstration. This was a reckoning. "Sir, if I could explain, you will have the opportunity to explain. In my office, at 1000 hours, bring your scoring records for the past 6 months." Drummond turned to the assembly. "This range is secured. All personnel will return to normal duties. Gunnery Sergeant Hollister and Chief Instructor Caldwell will accompany me immediately." He walked toward the administration building without looking back. Caldwell fell into step behind him, his expression carefully neutral. Hollister followed at a distance, his supporters conspicuously absent. Kira remained at the firing line, her rifle still warm in her hands. Around her, the crowd dispersed in clusters of whispered conversation. Phrases drifted past. "Did you see that shot?" The colonel looked furious. "Hollister is finished." Pham approached, his face bright with something between relief and vindication. "You did it. You actually did it." "One shot does not change a system. No, but it makes the system visible." He gestured toward the administration building, where Hollister had disappeared. "Everyone saw, everyone knows. That changes things." Coburn passed them, close enough to speak but avoiding eye contact. His pace was hurried, his shoulders hunched with the posture of someone reconsidering every choice that had brought him to this moment. Kira watched him go. "Some people will need time. Some people do not deserve time. That is not our decision to make." She began disassembling her rifle, each movement practiced and precise. "We control what we do. How others respond is their responsibility." The morning stretched into afternoon. Kira secured her equipment, completed routine duties, and waited. The administration building remained sealed, its windows revealing nothing of the proceedings inside. At 1400 hours, Vance found her near the equipment shed. "The review is ongoing," Vance said. Drummond requested footage from the past 3 months, every range session, every evaluation. That is a significant amount of material. It is a significant amount of evidence. Vance leaned against the shed wall, her expression carrying the weight of years, watching similar situations resolve differently. Hollister kept records, meticulous records. He believed documentation made him untouchable. Now that same documentation is being compared to objective camera footage, and the comparisons are unfavorable. The comparisons are damning. Vance straightened. "You should know something else. Drummond asked about your father, not officially, quietly, during a break in the proceedings. He wanted to know if you had received the envelope. I received it, and..." Kira touched her breast pocket where the letter rested. "He wrote what I needed to read. Nothing more." Marcus always had a talent for precision. Vance smiled, the first genuine smile Kira had seen from her. Not just with rifles, with words, with timing, with understanding what people needed before they knew they needed it. The administration building door opened. Caldwell emerged alone, his face set in the expression of someone who had witnessed something significant and was still processing the implications. He walked directly to where Kira stood. "The colonel wants to see you. Now." Drummond's office was smaller than its authority suggested. A desk, 2 chairs, windows overlooking the range where Kira had made her shot hours earlier. The walls displayed commendations and photographs spanning decades of service. Hollister was not present. "Close the door," Drummond said. "Sit." Kira complied. The chair was hard, designed for functionality rather than comfort. "I have reviewed 6 months of evaluation records," Drummond began, compared them to camera footage, interviewed 4 instructors and 7 candidates. "The pattern is clear and consistent, sir. Gunnery Sergeant Hollister has been removed from all evaluation duties pending formal investigation. His scoring records will be audited completely. Every candidate he assessed will have their evaluations reviewed and, where appropriate, corrected." The words landed with the weight of institutional acknowledgement. Kira had expected something, not this. "There is more," Drummond continued. "Chief Instructor Caldwell has recommended that you be offered an instructor position upon completion of your qualification. Given what I witnessed today, I am inclined to support that recommendation." "Sir, I am not certain. You are not certain you want to become part of the system you just challenged." Drummond's eyes met hers with the directness of someone who had asked himself the same question decades ago. "That hesitation is exactly why you should accept. I came here to keep a promise, not to change careers. Tell me about the promise." Kira was silent for a long moment. The question reached deeper than professional evaluation, touching places she had kept closed since the hospital room, and the last words, and the weight of a rifle case that represented everything her father had believed. 3 years ago," she said finally, "my father was dying. He knew it. I knew it. We had run out of treatments and options and time." She paused, organizing memories into words. "The last coherent conversation we had was about this place, about what it meant, about what it had become." He was disappointed. He was angry. He had built a reputation here on principles that he believed were permanent. Excellence through honest evaluation, standards that meant something because they were applied fairly. He watched from a distance as those principles eroded, replaced by politics and favoritism, and the kind of subjective assessment that destroys more than it develops. "So he asked you to come here. He asked me to stand where he had stood, to prove that the old ways still worked, to make it impossible for people like Hollister to claim that excellence requires compromise." Kira touched her breast pocket. "He did not tell me how to do it. He trusted me to figure that out." Drummond was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the sound of range activity filtered through the windows, the ordinary machinery of training continuing despite everything that had shifted. "Your father and I served together," he said finally. 30 years ago, when this school was different. When standards were standards and results were results. He believed that systems could be fixed by people who refused to accept their corruption. He stood, walked to the window. He was right, but he was also impatient. He wanted change to happen faster than institutions allow. You disagreed with him. I disagreed with his methods, not his goals. Drummond turned back to face her. "You have accomplished something today that he never could. You made the system convict itself using its own documentation. That is not just marksmanship. That is institutional warfare conducted with precision and patience." The compliment carried weight Kira had not expected. She had come here for closure, for the completion of a promise. The possibility that she had achieved something larger had not entered her calculations. "The instructor position," Drummond continued, "it is not a reward. It is a responsibility. If you accept, you become accountable for how this place operates. You cannot change things from the outside. You can only change them from within. And if I refuse, then you leave having kept your promise. You proved what your father believed, but the system continues as it was, eventually finding new ways to corrupt itself, new Hollisters to exploit its weaknesses." Kira thought about Pham, about the young Marine who had almost quit because no one told him the equipment was sabotaged. She thought about Coburn, about the silent complicity that enabled systematic destruction. She thought about the candidates who would come after her, facing the same invisible barriers, the same subjective assessments, the same slow erosion of confidence. "I have a condition," she said. "Name it." "Evaluation transparency. Every score must be verifiable against objective criteria. Every assessment must be documented in ways that can be reviewed and challenged. No more subjective determinations that cannot be questioned." Drummond smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible, but it carried the recognition of someone who had heard the right answer. "That condition is already being implemented, starting today." The door opened. Caldwell entered with a folder. "Sir, The preliminary audit is complete. 17 candidates require score corrections. 3 should be reinstated immediately. 2 others may have grounds for appeal of previous dismissals. Process the corrections, contact the dismissed candidates. And Caldwell? Drummond paused. Make sure everyone knows why these changes are happening. Transparency starts now. Caldwell left. Drummond turned back to Kira. Report to the instructor cadre tomorrow at 0800. We have work to do. The weeks that followed moved with the strange rhythm of institutional transformation. Hollister was transferred to administrative duties pending investigation. His presence on the training ranges replaced by instructors who understood that evaluation meant accuracy rather than agenda. Kira began her instructor rotation quietly, observing before teaching, learning the machinery of the school from the inside. She discovered what she had suspected, that most personnel were not corrupt, merely compliant. They had followed Hollister because following was easier than questioning, because the system rewarded conformity and punished dissent. Changing that required more than policy. It required example. Her first training session came 3 weeks after the 200-yard shot. A new class of 12 candidates stood at the assembly area, their faces carrying the mixture of anticipation and anxiety that she remembered from her own arrival. "I am Staff Sergeant O'Ellerin," she said. "For the next 6 weeks, I will be one of your primary evaluators. I want to establish expectations clearly from the beginning." The candidates straightened. Some had heard stories. Some had seen footage. All of them knew the name. "This course will be difficult. The standards are demanding. Many of you will struggle. Some of you may fail." She paused, letting the words settle. But difficulty and failure will come from the standards themselves, not from anyone's personal agenda, not from subjective assessments that cannot be verified, not from equipment that has been sabotaged or evaluations that have been manipulated. She walked along the line, making eye contact with each candidate in turn. "My job is to test your limits, to find your weaknesses and help you strengthen them, to push you beyond what you believe possible. My job is not to break you. It is not to invent obstacles that serve my ego rather than your development. Do you understand the difference?" 12 voices answered together. "Yes, Staff Sergeant." "Good. Then we begin." The training sessions that followed established patterns that would outlast any single instructor. Scores matched performance. Feedback addressed specific, correctable issues. Candidates who struggled received guidance rather than humiliation. The atmosphere shifted from competition against each other to competition against standards. Pham completed his qualification with scores that reflected his actual ability. On the day his results were posted, he found Kira at the equipment shed. "I passed," he said. "Actually passed, not barely passed, not passed with asterisks. Passed. You earned it. I almost quit. Do you remember? Week 2. I was ready to walk away because I thought I did not belong here." His voice carried the weight of recognition. "You told me I had a choice, that the equipment was sabotaged, not my ability. I told you the truth. Nobody else did." Pham straightened, his posture carrying new confidence. "I applied for assistant instructor duties. Caldwell approved it this morning. I want to do what you did, help people see the difference between real obstacles and manufactured ones." Kira felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of tension she had carried since the hospital room. This was what her father had meant. Not just proving that the old ways worked, building something that would continue after she was gone. "There is something you should understand about this work," she said. "It is not about being liked. Some candidates will resent you for holding them accountable. Some will blame you when they fail to meet standards. The job is not to be popular. The job is to be fair." "I understand." "You will be tested. People who preferred the old system will push back. They will question your methods, your judgments, your right to evaluate them." She met his eyes. "When that happens, you remember what brought you here. You remember what it felt like to doubt yourself, because someone else decided you did not belong." Pham nodded slowly. "Make it better than you found it." "Exactly," Drummond observed from the administrative building as Kira conducted her afternoon training session. The candidates moved through positional exercises with focus and precision, their improvement visible even from this distance. Vance appeared beside him. "She has a gift for teaching," Vance said. "Not just the technical elements, the attitude, the approach." Her father had the same gift, but Marcus was too angry to use it effectively. He saw problems and wanted immediate solutions. Kira understands that change requires patience. The audit results are final. 17 score corrections, 4 reinstatements, 2 formal complaints filed against Hollister that are proceeding through military justice. And the systemic changes? Implemented across all evaluation programs, camera documentation, verification protocols, appeal processes. Vance paused. There has been resistance. Some instructors prefer the old discretionary model. They will adapt or transfer. The standards are not negotiable. On the range below, Kira was demonstrating stance adjustment to a candidate who had been struggling with consistency. Her movements were economical, precise, conveying information through example rather than excessive explanation. Marcus would have been proud, Vance said quietly. Marcus would have been impatient, Drummond replied. He would have wanted faster progress, broader reforms, immediate transformation of every program on every base. He smiled slightly. His daughter understands that foundations matter more than speed. Build correctly, and the structure endures. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the range as Kira walked toward the 200-yard line. She had not returned to this spot since the qualification shot, occupied with new duties and new responsibilities. But something had been pulling her back. The marker stood where it had always stood, a simple post indicating distance. But as she approached, she noticed something new. Letters carved into the wood, rough but legible. No way. She traced the carving with her fingers. Someone had memorialized the moment. Someone had wanted to preserve what had happened here, to mark the spot where expectations had shattered against reality. Her radio crackled. Vance's voice. "Oh, Ellerin, report to my office when you have a moment. There is something you should see." The office was small, cluttered with administrative materials and service photographs. Vance stood by her desk, holding an envelope and a frame. "This was in storage," Vance said, "from the records division. They were organizing materials related to your father's service, and they found this." She handed Kira the frame. Inside was a photograph, black and white, showing a young man in uniform standing at a firing position. The stance was perfect, the focus absolute, and the location was unmistakable. 200 yards, range 4, the same marker, the same position. "This was taken 25 years ago," Vance said. "The day your father set the standing shot record that held until you matched it." Kira stared at the photograph. The resemblance was striking, not just in appearance but in posture, in the particular way he held the rifle, in the economy of movement that she had inherited without realizing its source. "He planned this," she said. "He planned everything. The rifle, the training you received, the timing of when you would come here." Vance's voice was gentle. "Marcus knew he was dying. He used the time he had left to prepare you for this exact moment. Why did he not tell me? Because he wanted you to earn it, not inherit it." Vance sat on the edge of her desk. "If you had known about the photograph, about the record, about his deliberate preparation, you might have felt like you were completing his story rather than writing your own. He wanted you to face Hollister and the system and the pressure without knowing that he had already calculated your path to victory." Kira set the photograph down carefully. The weight of the gesture settled over her. The realization that her father's final act had been an elaborate expression of trust. He had believed she could do this. More than believed. He had known. "There is something else," Vance said, handing her the envelope. This was with the photograph, sealed, your name on the front. The handwriting was familiar, the same precise script from the letter she had already received. But this envelope was older, the paper yellowed with time. She opened it. Inside was a single page. "If you are reading this, you have done what I knew you would do. You stood where I stood. You proved what I believed, and you discovered that the rifle was never the weapon. You were. It is not the tool that makes the marksman. It is the marksman who reveals the tool." "Wrong gun," they said. They forgot that there is no wrong gun when the right person is pulling the trigger. Now you know. Now they know. Make it matter. Build something that outlasts both of us. Unsigned, undated, but unmistakably his. Kira folded the letter and placed it with the first one, both resting against her heart. 3 years of grief had accumulated like pressure behind a dam, held back by duty and purpose and the momentum of daily survival. Now, finally, the dam cracked. She did not sob, did not collapse. She simply stood in Vance's office and let the tears come, silent streams that carried weight she had not acknowledged she was carrying. Vance said nothing. Some moments required witness, not intervention. When Kira finally spoke, her voice was steady. "He said make it matter. Build something that outlasts both of us. And will you? I already have. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Fam, the candidates I am training, the system changes that are being implemented, that is the legacy he wanted. Not a single shot, not a single moment. An ongoing commitment to doing things correctly. Grief does not leave, Vance said quietly. It trains you. Yes, Kira straightened. It does. The audit expansion came 2 weeks later. What had begun as a review of Hollister's evaluations grew into a systematic examination of assessment practices across multiple programs. Officers from adjacent commands requested access to the documentation protocols that Coronado had implemented. The reforms spread outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Coburn requested a meeting with Kira on a Tuesday afternoon. They met in the empty classroom, both standing, neither comfortable with the formality of sitting. I came to apologize, Coburn said, for laughing, for going along, for being part of what happened to you and others. Why did you do it? Fear. The word came out flat, stripped of excuse. I saw what happened to people who challenged Hollister. I told myself that compliance was survival, that if I kept my head down and played along, I would make it through without becoming a target. And now I understand that compliance was complicity. Every time I laughed at his jokes, I reinforced his authority. Every time I looked away from unfair treatment, I participated in it. Coburn met her eyes. I do not expect forgiveness. I am not asking for it. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did. Kira was quiet for a long moment. The instinct to condemn was strong, to draw clear lines between perpetrators and victims. But she had learned from her father that systems corrupted individuals and that reforming systems required reclaiming individuals from their corruption. Fear explains behavior, she said finally. It does not excuse it, but it can be overcome. She paused. What you do now matters more than what you did before. The choice you make tomorrow carries more weight than the choice you made yesterday. How do I make tomorrow different? Speak when you see wrongdoing. Support people who are being targeted. Use whatever authority you have to protect fairness instead of undermining it. She moved toward the door. That is how you make amends, not through apology, through action. Coburn nodded slowly. I will try. Trying is the beginning. The new class assembled for Kira's opening lecture on a morning when the Pacific fog had burned away early, leaving clear skies and a sense of possibility. Welcome to Scout Sniper School, she began. Over the next several weeks, you will be tested in ways you cannot anticipate. Your technical skills will be evaluated. Your physical endurance will be pushed. Your mental resilience will be examined. She walked along the row of candidates, meeting each set of eyes. I am not here to be your friend. I am not here to make you comfortable. I am here to ensure that the standards we claim to uphold are actually upheld. That means honest evaluation, genuine feedback, consequences that match performance. She stopped at the front of the room. Some of you have heard stories about this place, about instructors who played favorites, about evaluations that reflected politics rather than ability. Those days are over. The system has changed because people refuse to accept its corruption. A hand went up. A young Marine, barely 20, with the eager expression of someone who had more questions than judgment about when to ask them. Staff Sergeant, is it true you made the 200-yard standing shot with an antique rifle? The room tensed. The question bordered on inappropriate, personal inquiry in a professional setting. The rifle is 23 years old, Kira said. It belonged to my father, and yes, I made the shot. Why? The candidate pressed. Why use old equipment when newer options were available? Kira considered the question. It deserved a real answer, because the rifle was not the variable being tested. I was. She returned to the front of the room. People will tell you that success requires the latest technology, the newest innovations, the most expensive equipment. Sometimes that is true, but more often, success requires mastery of fundamentals, discipline that does not depend on conditions, competence that functions regardless of tools. She let the words settle. Someone once told me that I brought the wrong gun to this place, that my equipment was outdated, my approach was obsolete, my presence was unwelcome. She paused. They were wrong, not about the equipment, about what makes a shooter. It is not the rifle that matters, it is the person behind it. The lecture continued, covering practical elements and procedural requirements. But the underlying message had been delivered. Standards were standards. Tools were tools. What mattered was the character that connected them. After dismissal, the candidate who had asked the question approached. "Staff Sergeant, I apologize if my question was out of line." It was not out of line. It was honest. Kira studied him. "Why did you ask?" "Because I heard what people said about you before the shot. The jokes, the dismissal, and then I heard what happened after." He hesitated. "I wanted to understand what made the difference." "The difference was refusing to accept their definition of me. They said wrong gun. I heard wrong assumption." She smiled slightly. "When someone tells you that you do not belong, they are telling you more about themselves than about you. Remember that." The seasons changed. Classes cycled through. The reforms that had begun with a single 200-yard shot embedded themselves in institutional practice until they became assumption rather than innovation. Pham earned his full instructor certification and began training candidates of his own, carrying forward the principles he had learned when he was ready to quit. Coburn transferred to a leadership development program, his recommendation letter noting his willingness to acknowledge past mistakes and commit to different approaches. Vance retired with a ceremony that Drummond personally attended, her service record amended to include commendation for her role in facilitating institutional reform. She left Kira the photograph of Marcus at the 200-yard line, framed properly now, with a note that said simply, "He would be proud. Now, make him even prouder." Drummond rotated to a new command, his final act at Coronado being the formal establishment of evaluation transparency protocols that would outlast any single administrator. The policies bore no individual name. That was deliberate. Systems survived personalities. Institutions outlasted individuals. Kira remained. She stood at the 200-yard line on an evening when the light turned everything golden, the ocean visible in the distance, the range empty except for her presence. The marker still bore its carved letters. No way. A memorial to a moment that had changed everything that followed. She had brought her rifle case, not to shoot, just to complete a ritual she had not realized she needed. She opened the case. Let the evening light touch the weapon her father had carried for 23 years. Felt the scratches in the stock that his fingers had made. Saw her own reflection in the age scope that had witnessed his journey and now witnessed hers. "We did it together," she said to no one and everyone. Different times, same place, same purpose. A figure approached from the direction of the administrative buildings. Kira did not turn. She recognized the footsteps. Caldwell stopped a few feet away, respectful of the moment. "New class arrives tomorrow," he said. 12 candidates. 3 of them specifically requested assignment to your training section." "Why?" "Because word has spread about the shot. About the changes, about what this place has become." Caldwell paused. "There is something else. One of the candidates was previously dismissed from the program, 3 years ago, under Hollister's evaluation. The reinstatement appeals. Approved, he is coming back to try again." Caldwell watched her profile. "He wanted you to know that he almost gave up entirely, that what happened here, what you started, gave him reason to believe he deserved another chance." Kira closed her rifle case. The latches clicked with familiar certainty. "Tomorrow," she said. "Oh, 800. Same as always." "Same as always." Caldwell left. Kira remained at the marketer for another few minutes, watching the light change, feeling the weight of continuity and responsibility and hope. The rifle case felt different now, not lighter, not heavier, just different. It no longer carried only memory. It carried purpose, direction, the specific gravity of a promise kept and a legacy extended. She walked back toward the barracks, the case in her hand, the marker behind her, the future ahead. Tomorrow, new candidates would arrive. They would face challenges she would design. They would struggle against standards she would uphold. Some would succeed, some would fail. All of them would be evaluated fairly, judged accurately, treated with the dignity that excellence deserved. That was the system she had built, the foundation her father had dreamed of, and she had made real. Wrong gun, they had said. Wrong assumption, she had proven. The words carved in the marker would remain long after she was gone. No way. A testament to the moment when everything changed. When a woman with an old rifle had stood alone against a corrupted system and refused to accept its verdict. Not because she was special, because she was prepared, because she had been trained by someone who believed in her before she believed in herself. because she understood that the rifle was never the weapon. She was. And now, 12 new candidates would learn the same lesson. And they would teach it to others. And the chain would extend forward through years and decades and generations of shooters who understood that excellence was not a gift, but a discipline, not an inheritance, but an achievement. The evening deepened toward night. Kira reached her barracks, set down her case, and began preparing for tomorrow. The story continued. The promise endured. And somewhere, in whatever space the dead occupied, Marcus O'Elleran smiled. They said it was the wrong gun. It turned out to be the biggest mistake they ever made. If Kira's story reminded you of your own battles against unfairness, let us know in the comments. We read every story. For more tales of resilience and justice like this one, consider subscribing. See you in the next video.